Morning. The announcement you're going to hear this morning is truly historic, certainly not like anything I have ever heard. Last month, I stood up with CEOs of the major companies in the city of Detroit, Mary Barra and Bill Ford, Mark Stewart from FCA, Jay Farner from Quicken, Chris Illich, Jerry Anderson from DTE, Dan Lepp from Blue Cross, Wright Lassiter from Henry Ford, and Gary Torgow, the chair of the board of TCF Bank, and Cindy Paskey from Strategic Staffing, and Dr. Audrey Gregory of the Detroit Medical Center also signed up to the commitment, although the speed with which we put it together, they couldn't make it that day. These major 11 companies, I asked them that day to do something different, largely at the suggestion of Reverend Wendell Anthony. I didn't ask them, give me a hiring goal, give me a dollar goal. I said, what I want is your voice. I want you to stand out and speak out clearly against the racial injustice in the country and in the criminal justice system. And for a corporate leader, many of whom are publicly running publicly traded corporations, it's a lot easier to write a check than to stand up and make a clear moral statement at a time of political tension, and yet every one of them did it. And since that day last month, you've seen each of these companies go back and take actions in ways that are fundamentally better for this country. And today, Gary Torgow and TCF Bank are here to talk about an extraordinary commitment. And Gary Torgow's commitment to our project goes back to 2014. When I became the mayor, I had this idea that if we knocked down the burned out houses, we could save a lot of the old houses and get them fixed up. And we started in the Marygrove neighborhood, absolutely beautiful architecture and a lot of burned out houses. And I put Gary Torgow in the car one day, and he and I drove through the neighborhood. And I said, we'll knock down the burned out houses, but many of these houses are beautiful. They can be saved, but we're going to need a bank to make loans to get them fixed up. And at the time, the houses in that neighborhood were probably going for less than $10,000. And Gary said, you know, we're a little bank in Troy with only a branch or two in Detroit. And I said, Gary, you may be a small bank, but you have the moral heart of a giant. And I just want you to start with this neighborhood and go for there. Then Talmer Bank did go into the Marygrove neighborhood, found out you couldn't just make loans. You actually had to put in down payment assistance so we could get new homeowners, we could build wealth. And he called me a year later and we'd gone from $10,000 to $30,000 a house, and a year or two later to $60,000 a house. We were building wealth in the black community in a way that had not been done in a while. And the question of inequality in wealth in this country has its roots, as we all know, that go back generations, from discrimination in employment and business opportunities where African Americans couldn't make the same money, to the inability to get loans to start businesses, to the federal government's intentional policies to make it difficult for there to be black home ownership. And one of the few cities in the country that succeeded in building black wealth in the last century was Detroit, where African Americans could get jobs in manufacturing and start businesses, could own their own homes. And you've seen in this city, it's not unusual in this city, to see people who are living in the homes of their grandparents. That was a source of wealth that was passed down to generations. And so we took a small step there, and I've been very fortunate in recent years. The other banks have pitched in a big way. Fifth Third and Flagstar and Huntington and, of course, JP Morgan Chase have all come in an extraordinary way. But little Talmer Bank is now managed to become TCF Bank, and Gary Torgow is chairman of the board of the largest bank in the state of Michigan, one of the largest in the Midwest. It's still growing. They're building a 21-story corporate headquarters in downtown Detroit. They're moving in 500 employees. And they did something that was very important to me. They replaced the name of our convention center from somebody who drove African Americans out of their homes to the name of an institution that's making black home ownership accessible again. All of that would have been an exceptional accomplishment. But today you're going to hear something that goes far beyond that. A commitment to start to reverse the historic discrimination. And it couldn't be more appropriate than this week when the City Council put Proposal N on the ballot. And we are going to renovate those 8,000 homes. We want Detroiters to buy those homes. We want to see the home ownership rate in Detroit go back to where it was and to build wealth. And the other thing was, in this room yesterday, I had 20 black business owners who are in the renovation, construction, demolition, landscaping business. And as we invest this $250 million in Detroit companies, they're going to need loans. We can't rely on Motor City Match. The government can't do it. We've got to have the private sector be able to back the companies. Nobody's given these companies anything. We got great companies who are going to grow and succeed, but they have to have access to capital. And the question is, how were they going to get it? And so as we're asking the question, how are we going to get mortgages to fix up these houses? How are we going to get loans for black businesses to grow with the city? Gary Torgow said, I've been thinking since that first week in June, what is TCF's moral obligation? And he's here today to talk about what they're going to do. So please welcome a giant in the city of Detroit, Gary Torgow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good morning. It is my honor to be here today representing TCF and its CEO, Craig Dahl. With me this morning is our President and COO, Tom Schaefer, our Executive Vice President of Regional Banking, Mike Jones, our Director of Fair Lending and Responsible Banking, Lindsay Youssef, our Chief Diversity Officer and Director of Strategic Partnerships, Donnell White, our Director of Community Relations, formerly of the City of Detroit, Latrice McClendon, and our Director of Corporate Communications, Randy Barris. On June 23, 1963, in the convention hall now called the TCF Center, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. previewed one of the greatest speeches in the history of mankind. Long remembered as his I Have a Dream speech, Reverend King delivered an updated version of the address 2 months later on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. He bent the arc of justice with his words and his will. But he stood here first in our hometown in Detroit, and he summoned Americans to the cause of justice. Before joining a march along Woodward Avenue, Reverend King told the crowd that Black Americans were too long denied the economic fruits of freedom. 57 years later, we gather today in honest acknowledgement that his dream is as yet unfulfilled. A few weeks ago, shortly after George Floyd's tragic murder shook America to its core, our mayor, Mike Duggan, summoned business leaders to a news conference. The mayor and NAACP President, Reverend Wendell Anthony, urged us to do more than just talk about racial equity and social justice. We collectively, as representatives of Detroit's corporate community, pledged to them to walk the walk. For TCF Bank, that challenge led to a number of critical initiatives, including 2 that we launched today. These programs address the systemic racism that has denied too many their piece of the American dream, the opportunity to own a business, and the ability to own a home. Today, we humbly strengthen our commitment to right historic wrongs with a loan program audacious in its size and ambition, a $1 billion commitment for minority communities, a $1 billion commitment for small businesses owned by women and minorities and minority communities. With this pledge, small business loans of up to $1 million each will be available across our bank's footprint. This means dramatically more access to capital for people and communities long denied their fair share. As is always the case for TCF, Detroit's hometown bank, we will do all we can in all of our markets, but in particular in Detroit, Wayne County, and the state of Michigan. Our great thanks today is also due to County Executive Warren Evans, who inspired us to invest right when the pandemic began with the Wayne County in a pace-setting small business loan program, which saw great success during these most difficult times. As the numbers bear out, Black business owners are twice as likely as others to be rejected for loans and far more likely to be refused full funding. That must stop. And we hope for TCF and its customers it starts here today. Also today, we are announcing a $10 million expansion of our Heart and Home program, which began right here in Detroit, Michigan, to assist low and moderate income homebuyers. We will provide through this program grants of up to $3,000 to help cover closing costs and down payments for new home purchases. You've seen the grim data. Black homeownership is at a record low level. In some ways, the racial imbalance in homeownership is worse today for Blacks than it was in 1963, when housing discrimination was still legal. So why are we taking these steps today? Well, as you might remember from Mayor Duggan's news conference, it starts with the mayor of Detroit, Mike Duggan, and Reverend Wendell Anthony, leaders of leaders, who say often to us, everybody can do something to create change. There's something remarkable about this moment, a moment of political division, a moment of pandemic, a moment of protests in the streets. Yes, this is a time of hard and critical reflection, but it is also a time for renewal and hope. We know from history that great crises can lead to huge leaps forward in the march of humankind. This is one of those moments, and it is a time for brave optimism. Look at the history of this city of Detroit. In 1967, just 4 years after Reverend King marched along Woodward Avenue in our town, police brutality and economic injustice spurred such hatred that this city burned. Today, thank God, we see different and something ever so hopeful. Yes, there is a handful of people here and elsewhere who are resorting to violence, and yes, there are some people too callous to recognize that racism still exists. But for most of us, this is a moment when we recognize that none of us will be truly free until all of us are truly equal. It is therefore incumbent upon us to act with what the Reverend King called the fierce urgency of now, to act with courage, to act in faith with each other, and in our ability to pull together when the world seems to be falling apart. We assembled here have faith and confidence in Detroiters. We have faith and confidence in Michiganders. We have faith and confidence in Americans. And we hope we can do our part to help realize these American ideals. 2 months after his march in Detroit, Reverend King was a featured speaker at the March on Washington, where he gave his I Have a Dream speech. Another speaker that day was John Lewis. Congressman Lewis passed away a few days ago and leaves a legacy of personal heroism and grace that serves to challenge us here today. On that historic day in 1963, Reverend King's ever-soaring prose inspired a nation to dream of what could be. Today, 57 years later, with the help of a great mayor, a great city, we are trying to do our part in a billion ways to help realize his dream for America, a realization born of optimism and hope, opportunity as its driver, and prosperity as its goal for all. As Reverend King said in our hometown and for all Detroiters that day in 1963, and with this faith I will go out and carve a tunnel of hope through the mountain of despair. With this faith I will go out with you and transform the dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. Mr. Mayor, Reverend Anthony, Mr. County Executive, Mrs. Sharita Smith, we stand proudly with each of you, inspired by the work you've assigned and brimming with optimism for our bright tomorrows. Thank you very much.
The man who generated a lot of this momentum with a phone call to me one day saying, do you think we could get the corporate leaders, the CEOs in this town, to make an unequivocal moral statement and all stand together? And it has created a great deal of momentum. The longtime president of the Detroit branch, NAACP, Reverend Dr. Wendell Anthony.
Thank you, Mayor. And let me say good morning to everybody and to my good friend and brother, Gary Torgow. I was so excited about this, I even got a ticket coming down here and got pulled over by the police. And I didn't say who I was and all of that, but I just dealt with it. This is historic This is the man, and this is the plan. And I want to commend Gary and the mayor. I have a statement because of the historic nature of this. As we stand here today, following the recent passing of two giant American icons for civil rights and human rights, Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian and Congressman John R. Lewis, we are indeed living the words of Reverend C.T. Vivian, who said, "Life is in the doing." Congressman Lewis also reminded us that we must be headlights and not taillights. TCF Financial Corporation, under the stellar leadership of its chairman and my friend, Gary Torgow, is indeed doing what must be done to provide economic access and equity of opportunity for our community. As the chairman of the TCF Financial Center and of that corporation, Gary Torgow is demonstrating clearly that your bank, his bank, is serving as a headlight and not a tail light. This program initiative of $1 billion with a B in loan commitments for minority communities and minority and women-owned small businesses puts the walk in the talk to bring about economic change. Several weeks ago, on June 3rd, Mayor Duggan and I, and the mayor's already spoken about that, challenged corporations and businesses to step up and step out in their voices and actions against systemic racism, both inside and outside of their corporate sanctuaries. We salute those actually taking steps to bring about systemic change. When TCF changed the name of our Cobo Convention Center from Cobo Hall to the TCF Center, they not only changed the name, but they in fact changed the game. Small businesses are vitally important to our community. Heart and home grants are essential to neighborhood growth and development. They are really at the heart and epicenter of city life. TCF's intention to double the grant funds from 2019 and 2020 is indeed significant. We must now work to make certain that the opportunity for loans and grants is actualized in the community. I think Executive Evans and the mayor have indicated that. I know that Gary is committed to that. There must be a clear and specific pathway towards realizing this opportunity. Individuals and businesses must be prepared to take advantage of this unique moment in our economic history. So today we salute TCF for this bold initiative. Not only are you building a new house to place your headquarters in the heart of downtown Detroit, you are really establishing a new home. For it is from the home that individuals grow, prosper, and fulfill their purpose. Your commitment to strategic partnerships, philanthropy, and service sets a prime example. It inspires us to send out another call to all other businesses and corporations to follow your lead. Everyone can help to lead, from the boardroom to the executive team, to procurement, to personnel, to community outreach, and advocacy against systemic racism and inequality. TCF is lighting the way. We invite and encourage others to follow the path that they have so clearly and distinctly illuminated. Thank you for bringing about this historic reality in the city of Detroit and in Wayne County.